Let's go. Okay, we have a little bit of a delay here. I hope this is not problematic. Okay. All right. We can go ahead and get started because we are unfortunately, oh, see, this is my toxic trait right here. Like, why must I'm gonna have to close that. The fact that it's only one cabinet, though, is honestly impressive. I don't know if anybody else does that, where you just like cannot be bothered to close cabinet doors. There we go. That's better for the audience. What is up, guys? I sadly am going to be alone tonight. We are not going to be joined by Coach Alessia. She had some family stuff to attend to. So you guys are just stuck with me. I used to do these by myself, as you guys know, if you've been here for a while, all the time. And I have not done that in a while. Alessia and I think just have such a good flow normally, and she helps kind of keep me on track. And a couple of you guys have commented recently and given me a compliment on my ability to like bring the point back around. Like say I'm going to come back to something and then actually come back to it. And this has taken years of listening to my own voice on stories and podcasts and lives and things like that. I promise you, like, I don't even think I'm that good of a public speaker now. This is like 4 years in the making. So those compliments actually like that hits. So thank you. I'm going to do my best tonight, but we kind of have a rambly topic in that we're just talking about me. We're talking about my fitness journey. I'm telling you guys some personal stories and just kind of like things I've learned over the years, because I did this once on a podcast. And I think sometimes it's really easy to look at someone whose entire life revolves around health and fitness, right? That's my profession. That is also my hobby. That is my passion. So my 24 hours in a day looks quite different than a lot of people's. And I think it's really easy to kind of look at that and be like, oh, this person just has it figured out, or like, that's just what you do. And, think that it's always been that way, or, that this just came naturally. And that's not the case. And I've alluded to in these lives a couple of times some unhealthy tendencies I had in the past. And I've referenced some disordered eating. I've referenced some like really, really bad relationship with my body, with my food. And I realized I haven't talked about that here in this Facebook group. I did a long podcast episode on this. I will link the podcast episode. It's a little unhinged. So now I know you guys are going to go listen to it. I talked about a lot of things I probably shouldn't have talked about, from past relationships to past arrests to all kinds of things, and kind of how that all ties into where I am now. It was cathartic. It was nice for me to kind of tell that story. So if you really want to get into all the nitty gritty and just kind of like get to know me way too well, that is a good episode to listen to. I'm not going to go quite into all of that detail because I think I want to kind of tie in more so here the points that helped me get from all of that super unhealthy, really extreme behavior to where I am now, which I think, to be fair, has been the last couple of years has been pretty stable with this, of just feeling the most healthy I have ever felt in terms of my relationship with food, my relationship with my body, the balance that I have found that I honestly never thought that I would attain in my life. So for background here, I don't know if you guys know this, I was a competitive acrobatic gymnast when I was in high school. So, I mean, prior to that, like I was a very skinny kid. I actually got made fun of quite a lot for it. It was like one of those things that it was genetic. I didn't, I just got made fun of a lot for being too thin, being told I eat like a bird. None of that was intentional. I was completely unaware of my body for most of my life up to that point, other than when people would tell me I was too skinny. I got on birth control around age 15, and that's where things really changed for me. I gained quite a bit of weight in a very short period of time, which when you are already 15 and awkward and going through that phase of your life feels like the end of the world, as I'm sure some of you guys can remember. And it was about that time that I started being really hyper aware of my body, hyper aware of other people's bodies, and extremely self-deprecating and self-conscious. Like I had been told multiple times from 15 to probably 25, honestly, that I have body dysmorphia. Looking back, I absolutely probably did. But at the time, it was my complete fixation with food and my body, and it was extremely unhealthy. And nothing I did really seemed to work. And I obviously know now why, but at the time it just felt like I was running myself into the ground. trying to attain this six pack because I, for some reason, thought that was like the pinnacle. I have a six pack, if I have a flat stomach. I think too, if you guys grew up in the same sort of like time frame as I did, I'm 33 now. So when I was, 15 to 25, I feel like the beauty standard was a little different. It wasn't like popular to have, an ass and have curves at that time. It was I was watching the OC and idolizing Misha Barton at the time, who was, stick thin, thinking that that was the look. Can we just all agree collectively we're never bringing back low-rise jeans? Thank you very much, because I think that's part of the problem. Because unless you are literally model thin low-rise jeans, you're gonna have a belly, and I won't go back. You can't convince me. But I was a competitive gymnast through high school, and I just vividly remember counting calories even at that point and being very obsessed with. I had like basically a Pinterest board before it was Pinterest. And I talked about this quite a bit on the podcast. So I had a binder that I would cut out pictures of, people I wanted to look like, their ab workouts, the things in Cosmo that were like healthy recipes and things like that. And it just became very much a fixation and an obsession. And I feel like I just kind of throughout most of my life continued that trend of hyperfixating, obsessing, and really swinging the pendulum in a really extreme way. And then inevitably, just law of physics here, if you swing really hard in one direction, it's got to come back crashing down in the other direction. And it just took me such a long time, longer than many years than I would have liked to have spent on it, trying to find what worked for me and find balance, and mostly just like find this sense of harmony within myself. And truly it wasn't until I found like bodybuilding lifestyle, and like that's certainly extreme, and we're going to talk about that too, that I learned enough to get me to a place where, I found this sense of stability and balance in what I was doing. And I want to talk about the journey a little bit more. But I think a lot of you can probably relate to that sort of perfectionist mentality. And Alessia and I've talked about this on a previous live, but I feel like for the majority of my adult life, that was something that I was plagued with, of just this like all or nothing. There is no gray area. Like if I put my mind to something, it wasn't just I'm going to get healthier. It was I am now going to the gym 6 days a week and, just super hyper fixated on it. Same thing I did with running. When I finally got to college, I was no longer a gymnast. And so I had kind of ended up working at a running store. And instead of just, going for a run for fun, I decided I was now a runner, and I had to do many races. I did 3 half marathons, and through that training process, found out I was extremely anemic because probably my diet at that time. I decided I wanted to be, thin and healthy, and I thought that was vegetarian. So for many years, I was vegetarian. We're seeing a pattern here with the extremes, and that all or nothing mentality again had continued through the majority of my like teens and 20s. It really wasn't until I got to San Francisco, I hit a rock bottom point for me where I had kind of, again, another extreme. I moved to a new city for the first time, didn't know anyone, and the culture of my sales office was very social, and also lots of drinking in the city, lots of going out, late nights. And I just said yes to everything because I wanted to be the fun girl. I wanted to be the new cool girl in the office. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to like be accepted into the culture. And so again, just swing the pendulum. There was no 1 or 2 drinks at happy hour. It was if I'm out, I'm out. And that was probably a 3 or 4 night a week type of thing at that point in time. And I really hit a rock bottom with my health, and my weight was at the all-time highest I had ever seen at that point in time. And that's when I kind of decided like, okay, this is not it. This is not me. And I hit that point several times throughout my life, as you could probably imagine, right? When you're eating, when I was a gymnast, vividly remember eating, 100 calorie, the healthy choice soups, and doing a lot of calorie restriction. And I was training like 15 hours a week, would come home from practice and not eat afterwards because I thought I was going to get fat if I ate after 8 p.m., things like that. So my background, it really is more extreme in the sort of disordered eating. I wouldn't even say necessarily I had an eating disorder, but like we could argue that I was just never diagnosed and never like went to treatment for it. So I've shared a little bit about that, but again, I don't think I've told a lot of my personal story here. So fast forwarding back to, we talked San Francisco, again, had swung that pendulum too hard and just realized I was extremely unhealthy. I looked like crap. My skin looked like crap. My sleep was crap. None of my clothes fit. I just felt awful. And so again, in the all or nothing campaign that I like to do, I started that new year with a Whole30. You guys know what Whole30 is. It is an extreme elimination diet that was actually meant for an elimination diet purpose to identify food allergies and food sensitivities. People now use it for dieting purposes. And I just kind of wanted some sort of challenge, because up to this point, and even I'll see this with bodybuilding, a theme for me in my life was always, it was almost easier and took responsibility off of me to do the healthy thing, the right thing, whatever, to just follow some obscure set of rules, as opposed to actually taking the time to educate myself and to come up with a sustainable plan. It was easier, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have experienced this as well, to kind of just follow rules, right? I've had clients come to me and say things like, okay, just tell me what to eat and what I can't eat and give me rules. I do better with rules. And the reason that we don't do that is this entire story that I'm telling you right here, right? Because it does take a lot of personal responsibility off of you to do the thing that is in your best interest for your health. If you are unaware of what that is, and all you are doing is taking someone else's arbitrary rules and following them, having no real education on why or why not those rules are actually going to be suitable for you and your goals. Again, it takes a lot of personal responsibility off of it, and doesn't allow you to build any flexibility into your life, right? When it's yes or no, that's a lot easier for people who struggle with that all or nothing mentality. Did I follow the rule? Did I break the rule? If I've broken the rule, then I may as well just go all out. And I know I've experienced this myself. I'm sure if you're a client, you've experienced this. I'm sure if you're just in your own fitness journey, you've experienced this, where if you have one slip up throughout the day, you kind of just throw the entire day away, right? And that's sort of that, just like we did a live a couple of months ago about that sort of like perfectionist mentality. So I'll only touch on it a little bit here, but going forward, that low in San Francisco again inspired me to kind of like actually take a little bit more of an interest in food. I had studied nutrition in college, changed my major to kinesiology, was educated on like food science, but just still didn't really understand how to feed myself. I know it sounds silly, but it was not that intuitive. So that is about the time I started creating posts on Instagram. And again, can't just do something and have fun with it. I decided I needed to be a fitness influencer in a year, and started trying to post my own workouts and things like that. And it really wasn't until I found Whitney Simmons and got myself a coach that I think this is where things really started to shift for me, because the goals shifted. And I've talked about this a lot in previous lives as well, as like, hey, how are we measuring progress? Because up to that point for me, it had only been seeing the scale go down and seeing myself get smaller. It had always been, the goal had always been to shrink. And that is literal and metaphorical. When I really look back at that, like I hated being seen. I hated being vulnerable. I hated, getting attention in any way. Like I just wanted to shrink. And that, I feel like that mentality went with me for a really long time. And it really wasn't until I found strength training, bodybuilding, and hired my first coach again, that measure of progress was no longer the scale going down. It really took somebody else being an objective third party to be like, hey, why are we talking poorly about ourselves just because the scale's up 2 pounds? Like our goal right now is to build muscle. So of course the scale's going to go up, and things like that. So I think the perspective shift and shifting goals was one of the things that really started allowing me to live in a slightly more balanced way. And of course, again, I had to take it to extremes. I couldn't just lift weights. I had to become a bodybuilder and compete. So, at least when I apply myself to something, I really go for it. I feel like in the last couple of years, I've really grown out of that need to do everything 100%, like full force. But I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. When I started bodybuilding, that was when I started tracking macros seriously. I had done it before, I had dabbled with it, but again, probably like you guys have experienced, I like put numbers into a calculator, got 7 different things that told me different things. And it was very hard to stick to because I was just like, I don't even know if what I'm doing is right here. So that's when I actually hired a coach, had them guide me through a first attempt at a building season. I definitely should have made it go longer. Looking back, you know what you know now. But I think throughout this time was when I really started taking an interest in learning. I did a deadlift for the first time in like 2017. So if you guys think I've been just like lifting for my entire life, you're wrong. I was 27, 28 when I first actually started lifting seriously. I'd always been active. I'd always done fitness classes, but it was always group classes and HIIT classes and cardio. And it really wasn't until 2017, 2018 when I was like, okay, those scary things in the side of the gym, those things that are barbells that I only see men doing. I don't even know how to load one of those. I don't even know how to set one of those things up. I feel like I'm gonna feel like an idiot. And I did for a while. But I didn't do that till I was like 27 or 28 years old. So if you are watching this and you have not started lifting yet, if you've not started a fitness journey yet, if you think it's too late for you, I promise you it's not. There's a first day, first week, first month for every single person with every single thing. And I think for me, going through that experience of having my first coach, going through a bodybuilding competition, which again, obviously was the extremist extreme that there was, I did still really understand the, necessity for different phases and different goals and different seasons. And we've talked about that quite a bit on here as well. And I think the biggest thing that has helped me in my journey, and I've alluded to this also, is the education piece. I think so many of us get so confused by all the information that's out there. And a lot of us also want to take this sort of like, I don't want to say victim mentality, but remove the personal responsibility of having to take ownership for your own education, right? There's tons of free information out there. And I think I started my education binging YouTube videos. There's so much information on the internet. There's a lot of really qualified professionals. And I just really, once I started learning more about the body and how it works and the necessity for things like reverse diets. I'd never heard of a reverse diet until 2018 when I started doing one. The education piece for me was huge because for the first time in my life, I think it gave me permission to release some of the chokehold that I had on previous goals that I had that only revolved around me getting smaller and losing weight. And again, I'm not saying those are bad goals. If you need to lose weight for your health, don't think that I'm attacking that here at all. I'm not. I think you guys know that. It was more just, I realized that there was more to health than just weight loss. I realized that strength could be a goal to chase. I realized that, hormonal health could be a goal to chase. And that was an entirely different season of my life. But whether it was competing in gymnastics, running races, taking macro tracking and bodybuilding to an extreme, I feel like it took me many, many years of trial and error to really establish a place where I felt, how do I say, like consistency, but felt that sense of balance that I really did not think was achievable for me. The story I had always told myself was like, I had to work harder than everybody else in order to see results. And like, I had to do everything 100% in order to see results. And what is actually happening is, I was giving it 100% for maybe 3 days and then just, fucking off the other couple of days, because as soon as I slipped up a little bit, it was like, might as well let go. And I think a lot of that for me too, when I started tracking macros, did have to do with the fact that I was not eating a super whole food diet. When I did Whole30, I didn't care at all about calories. All I cared about was ingredients. When I started tracking macros, I suddenly felt like ingredients don't matter as long as I'm tracking my macros. And if it fits my macros, then fine. And I think that was something for me too, is shifting from a numbers focus to a quality focus again in my life has also given me a lot more balance, I think, in terms of numbers matter, ingredients definitely matter. If I want my hormones and my body to function optimally, those things all need to be taken into consideration. But again, I think it's just that when we swing the pendulum in one direction, you have to expect that it's going to come back. And so it took me years and years and years of my life and my fitness journey to really find this place where I feel like everything I'm doing is sustainable and everything I'm doing at this point is done with like my best interest at heart. And I think, again, if I'm really looking back at like what were the biggest changes for me, it was like, first of all, sometimes you just got to go through the shit to go through the shit. But I think education being the biggest one. So this is why it's so important for us to have the built out client portal for our clients to really I've sent some of my clients 15 to 20-minute voicemails, not every time, but just explaining why we're doing what we're doing. I try every single time I'm going to give some sort of protocol that maybe isn't fully understood to take the time to break down why we're doing what we're doing. Because I think if you know why you're doing what you're doing, it is much easier to stick to, especially when it's like you're doing something that seems kind of foreign, but you know that it's good for you. Like not dieting, if you've spent your entire life yo-yo dieting and chronic dieting and running yourself into the ground, you probably intuitively know that that's not what you need to do. But unless you really have the education to understand how that's impacting your body and your metabolism and your hormones and your mental health in a negative way, and how doing the opposite of that is going to eventually get you to where you want to be, it's just going to be playing the long game. It's much easier to commit to and subscribe to that if you understand the why behind what you're doing. So if you are trying to stick to something and you're having a hard time sticking to it, I would highly encourage you to ask yourself, like, do I really understand why this is beneficial? Do I understand why this is important for me? Do I understand how this is impacting my body? And, can I, with all of that information, understand why that's me doing? I know we don't always do what's best for us. Okay. But again, I do think the education piece is huge here. Don't just plug in some numbers or ask Google, like, what are bad foods for weight loss? What are good foods for weight loss? Breaking up with the good, bad, black and white mentality is going to be one of the best things you can do for yourself. And it's easier said than done. I understand that. But again, I think the education piece is huge here. When you understand how carbs function in your body and why you need them and what they're beneficial for, and that carbs also span vegetables and fruits and sweet potatoes, not just donuts and Pop-Tarts. When you can really look at all of that holistically and like get where, understand the education, I think that it becomes much easier to do things that are good for you when you believe that what you're doing is good for you. So again, a huge piece with our clients is like, I always just try to take the time and ask you guys in here too, like, hey, if you don't understand something, if you have a question, like, send us a message. We are always here to talk about things, because again, I think instead of just saying like, oh, I heard keto is bad, or, oh, I heard intermittent fasting is good, eliminate the words this is good and this is bad from your vocabulary when it comes to your health and fitness journey, because there's only things that are more aligned with your goals this season or less aligned with your goals this season. But there's nothing that is inherently morally good or bad about any food or exercise or anything that you're doing. So again, education and really understanding that, like, speaking in absolutes, all or nothing, black or white, good or bad, is almost never going to serve you on your health and fitness journey. If you can just really grasp those two things, you're already better off than the majority of people, and definitely better off than I was until I was literally like 30 years old. So those, I think, are some of the big things. And I think another thing too, for me, that has personally helped me a lot in my personal journey with perfectionism, because if you consider yourself a perfectionist, I highly encourage you to go watch that live we did a couple of months ago called Perfectionism is Bullshit. I had to get really honest with myself about that too. And I think something I had to do a lot of was, I heard this on a podcast, I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to make it work, I promise, is if busyness is your drug, rest can feel like stress. And I feel like that smacked me in the face way harder than it needed to. And I really had to sit and think about that as, for so many years of my life, I think I was tying my identity to my achievements, which makes perfect sense when I look at all the things the ladders I was trying to climb, the things I was trying to achieve. There was never simply just like, I picked up this hobby and I like it. It was like, now I need to be the best at it. I need to do the most extreme. I need to now run a marathon. I need to get on a bodybuilding, competitive stage. I need to XYZ. It couldn't simply just be taking on a new challenge. I had to accomplish something in order to enjoy it. I had to be good at it to enjoy it. And I think if that resonates with you, that's something you should probably learn to sit with, because my personal mindfulness, I think, and journey with things like nervous system regulation, breath work, meditation, journaling, my ability to be present and in the moment now is far greater than it ever was before. And I think that a lot of my, extreme tendencies or kind of binge and restrict cycles and things like that, is you can kind of get just very compulsive with that. And I think also too, using all of those extremes was an outlet and a distraction for me from the fact that I really wasn't that happy with myself or that happy with my life. I wasn't enjoying the city I was living in. I wasn't enjoying the career path I was in. I was chasing these measures of what everyone thought was supposed to be success. And I was miserable. I was not happy with myself. I was not happy with my life. And I felt like I was just watching my life pass me by on autopilot. And as soon as I really started to recognize that about myself and about my life and about the things I was doing to distract and externalize from that, whether that be binge eating or, going to extremes and being in the gym 7 days a week because rest felt like stress to me at that point in my life. The nervous system kind of regulation practices and mindfulness practices have been honestly life-saving for me in the last couple of years, because again, they kind of allowed me to really like be in the moment and be okay with slowing down. I think that go, 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 like needing to be doing something all the time mentality is honestly why I ended up with such extreme hormone issues. Because even when I was in the absolute thick of it, I've never felt worse in my life than like 2020, when all of my hormone stuff, when I got off of birth control, came to a just crashing. It was a disaster. Even when I was in the thick of that, I didn't want to hear anything anyone had to say about rest and relaxation. I was like, that's so woo-woo. Like, okay, we get it. But like, what do I need to take? What supplements do I need to take? Like what, okay, like what doctors do I need to see? Like, okay, like what protocols do I need to put in place? It was still so do. And there was no being. And I really don't think until the last 2 years or so, when I really started prioritizing rest as much as I did productivity, that when I became more productive, go figure. But also that like I was able to heal my hormones. We are coming up on 1 full year of actual healthy ovulatory cycles. That's the first year of my entire life that I can say that that's true. I just got really emotional. Man, I wasn't expecting that. Speaking of that, I feel like I'm definitely 2 days out from my period right now because I have tears in my eyes talking about that. But this is why I'm so fucking passionate about what we do here, because it is so much more than just what calories do I need for fat loss, or like what workouts should I do to grow my glutes. Like those things are easy. And if that's what you're coming to us for, like there's so much more than that. We're going to talk to you about fucking journaling practices. We're going to talk to you about nervous system regulation. We're going to talk to you about identifying sources of stress in your life and like where you can take more time for yourself and pulling back, and probably telling you to rest more if you need to. And again, all of that is things that I feel like I used to dismiss as not being important, but they are actually the only things that have allowed me to find true harmony and balance with my health, with my fitness, with my nutrition, with my body. I have never been less focused on any of those things, and they've never been better. And I'm not saying like, oh, if you just ignore all of your goals, like it'll just come to you. Okay, that's not what I'm saying, but I am saying like you are always going to be in that fight or flight hamster wheel, running into the ground, burnout, cycles of burnout. That was like so many years of my life. If all you're focused on is doing and achieving and physical metrics of progress, like weight loss, not to say that there's not seasons of that, but I think truly for me, educating myself on my body, nutrition, hormones, really looking into the science of everything, the education piece, like I said, huge. We work on that with clients. I think another thing was built-in flexibility. If you're one of my clients and you're watching this and you're like, oh, you've done that to me. Forced flexibility sometimes is really necessary for people who have a tendency towards extremes. So if you are setting macro targets for yourself and you're finding that you're getting a little bit obsessive with it, something that I have done for myself, something I've done for clients, is setting ranges as opposed to hard numbers. If you have a goal of 1,800 calories, why not you tell yourself anything between 1,700 and 1,900 is fine, right? Don't allow yourself to set yourself up for that obsessive behavior. If you know that's something you have a tendency for, forced flexibility. I like to add in untracked days, intuitive days, whatever, into clients' plans, into my own plan. Like, hey, this isn't a holiday. It's not a special occasion. It's not a day where you're going to eat out. Like, why don't we just take one day during the week where you don't track anything and you just kind of practice what you have learned, the education piece of tracking macros and sort of that built-in flexibility. We still have bumpers up on the other days, but like really learn how to trust yourself and listen to your body again. And I think getting my hormones on track has allowed me to listen to my body more than I ever was able to before. So I think between the learning how to actually fucking relax and rest and know that, something I've told clients too, and this is, again, me going on many tangents, but I know you guys like when I kind of just like tell my personal stories, which is great because I love telling them, is we always ask ourselves things like, oh, have I done enough? Or at least have I done enough? Have I been productive enough to warrant taking a break? That was how my whole first year and a half of my business went, where I was like, I felt somehow like I wasn't doing enough if I didn't have a really stressful, like 9 or 10 hour day. Now I'm like, why? have you done enough to rest versus have you rested enough to tackle all the things that you're trying to take on? I asked a client that the other day and she was like, holy shit, I never thought about that. I'm like, you haven't charged your battery at all. And then you're just like trying to do all of these things that you quite literally just do not have the energy, the fuel, the battery pack for. Have you rested enough in order to take on all these things versus have I done enough to warrant resting? You're allowed to rest, you're allowed to relax. And I think, again, like coming to terms with all of those things, educating myself, forced flexibility, breaking up with the absolutes in my fitness journey has been truly the things that have allowed me to get to balance, more so than saying balance when I'm, hitting my macros like an obsessed robot for 4 weeks, only to just like go on a bender for an entire week because I have some flexibility. That used to be my reality when I started tracking macros, fitting as many Frankenstein foods into my macros as possible and not focusing on whole foods. The more whole foods you put into your body, the more whole foods you're going to crave. So I think for me, like when I really think about, again, what's gotten me to this point of being completely free in my fitness and nutrition has been education, recognizing that there are goals that are completely valid and probably more fulfilling than losing weight, like getting stronger. And hormonal health plays a huge role in that, and nervous system regulation and your mental health and your ability to relax is going to absolutely be paramount to your ability to make progress. And we always think it's the opposite. I need to do more so I can make more progress, when in reality, doing more is probably keeping you from making progress. Being able to let go and relax and have a balance of rest and do is how you're going to make more progress and get yourself further and have a better time doing it. So I hope that was somewhat insightful. I'm just going to link the podcast episode because I feel like this story went on too many tangents. You guys were probably like, what's the point here? Besides the fact that balance and forced flexibility and working towards other goals are really good things to do if you're trying to be sustainable in your efforts, which most of us are. And that swinging the pendulum too hard in one direction is a really quick way to burn out. But I'm going to link the podcast episode I did here where I just kind of like talked more about my journey. But I hope that was, again, somewhat entertaining at least, or somewhat insightful, or maybe parts of it resonated with you. If you are, again, a self-identified perfectionist, check out that other live that we did and also let me know if any of this like spoke to you. But I'm going to wrap it up. Next week, we will have Coach Alessia back. If there are any topics or anything you guys want to hear about or have us cover, please let us know. But I hope you guys have a great night.